everyone. Please bear with us while we're trying to get everything established. This is new to some people. Thank you all for joining us. It's nice to see smiley faces. All right, we have a couple of people still coming in, so we'll just give them some time to get everybody here. All right. Awesome. All right. Give it about another 15 seconds. We still have people coming in. Thanks again, all of you, for being here. We're very excited. We have all kinds of cool stuff to show you tonight. Let's see.
You talk.
All right.
You can turn it down.
What? I have it on.
She's talking.
All right, I still see some more people coming in, so let's give them a minute to get situated here. All right, so it looks like we have quite a big number of people, which is great. We had about 30 people sign up for this, so this is absolutely awesome. We're super excited to offer this to you guys. I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping things. Oh, I see someone waving at me. Hi. So I just wanted to go over a few things. So of course, welcome. Thank you for coming. And also, if you're new to Zoom, then there's a couple things we can go over. So we ask that when a presenter is speaking, or either I'm speaking, that you can mute yourselves. So if you're looking at the bottom of your screen, there's a little microphone button. And if you were to click that button, it'll show up with a red line. So that means you are muted. So we ask that you guys please do this while we are presenting and talking. That way we can hear each other or hear ourselves and there's no background noise. Okay. Another thing also, some of you I think have already figured it out. Also on the bottom, there's a video button. So if you'd like us to see you or to see other people, you can click on the video button so we can see you all. Or if you'd like to turn it off, you can definitely do that too. That's fine. Another thing that we'd like to do and go over is if there's any questions. So say one of our presenters speaking and has a question, then on the bottom, you should see there's a little button that says chat. So we just ask that you hit the chat button, and then you can type in whatever your question is into the chat. And either myself or one of the other presenters and speakers will interrupt the other person, say, excuse me, someone has a question, and we'll address it then. We should be about presenting, the speakers have about 20 minutes and a 30-minute presentation, so it should take about an hour. After that, if you'd like to leave, you're welcome to, but if you want to stay for questions and answers with the speakers, then you're more than welcome to do that as well. And let's see, I also wanted to let you know that we will be recording this session, because if some people would like to come but they could not make it, this way it'll be available for them at a later time. Also, we plan on recording this and putting it on the NHACD website and also the local conservation districts websites as well. So if you need help navigating that, maybe we could go over that at some point too. And let's see, lastly, so we have two presenters today. Oh, excuse me, I should probably introduce myself. So I'm Whitney Lewis. I work for the Coos County Conservation District. I am the district manager. I am new to the position this summer. This is the first time I've ever hosted a huge Zoom like this, so please bear with me as I'm learning as well. But we're super excited to have all the different organizations and counties working together. So Carroll County, Coos County, and Grafton County. This is absolutely awesome. We're super excited. Our first presenter will be Olivia Saunders. So she is from Carroll County. She works for UNH Cooperative Extension, and she is their food and ag field specialist. So she will be our first presenter. Thank you, Olivia, for being here tonight. We appreciate it very much. Also, our second presenter is Jessica Wright. She's also from Carroll County, and she works for NHACD, which stands for New Hampshire Association of Conservation Districts. So she is their conservation planner. Even though she is located out of Carroll County, she does have access to the whole state. So she can travel to Coos, she can travel to Grafton, she can travel even in the southern part of the state as well. So she has a wide range of options. And with that, we will get started. I will turn it over to Miss Olivia. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Whitney, for the intro. I'm just sharing my screen. And let me get that in the presenter mode. There we go. Okay. So yeah, thanks for organizing and hosting the platform tonight. And just before we get started, this is a 5-part series. So there will be some additional material covered in the following weeks. So tonight's session is really a high-level overview of high tunnels and kind of a definition of what they are, since the terminology can sometimes be a little confusing. And so there will be some great information presented next week by some of my colleagues on site selection and construction. That will be presented by both some extension staff as well as some farmers who have experience building many different kinds of tunnels. NRCS will talk about some of their programs, cost assistance programs, along with the tool rental program that exists up in Coos County. Then we'll dig into some like seasonal high tunnel management that might include some information on pest management and fertility. And then we'll have a grower as well as Heather Bryant from Grafton County speaking about some of the challenges growing in the winter months with that season extension. So if we don't answer all of your questions tonight, tune in those subsequent weeks. So we wanted to just, I know Whitney gave an intro of who Jess and I are, but we wanted to know who else was here tonight and what your level of experience is right now. So if you guys want to open the chat box and put in there kind of what scale you're growing at, if you are more of a gardener or you're operating on a larger farm, do you already have a high tunnel? So we're just kind of interested in getting people's backgrounds so that we can make sure this talk is really helpful for you all. So we just figured that number scale might be a little bit easier. So 1, you're a small, maybe a gardener, small farm, somewhere in the middle, or you're operating a larger farm. Just looking at the chat box coming in. Some folks have tunnels, thanks to Kelly at NRCS. 2 small greenhouses. Some people are installing them. Okay, great. So a little bit of everything. Okay, cool. All right. So we wanted to just first kick this off with a working definition of what is a high tunnel, because like I said, some of the terminology is a little confusing. High tunnels, they're sometimes called hoop houses, basically the same thing. The most simple definition would be some hoops covered in plastic. That is essentially what a hoop house or high tunnel is. Not to be confused with a greenhouse, which is sometimes referred to. A greenhouse would be more of like a permanent structure. Maybe there's a concrete or cement floor, something that maybe has heat. Typically high tunnels are passively heated through the sun, passively ventilated through the open sides or open doors. They might have some kind of heat if it's needed, but typically we're just using the power of the sun for that season extension. High tunnels are really intensive management areas. Often there's a lot of double cropping happening, and commercial growers will be using these and harvesting from them almost 12 months out of the year. There's really no standard dimension to them. They come in all shapes and sizes, and we'll talk about the structure designs a little bit. And they're semi-permanent. Some of them are movable, but they are temporary structures. The one thing I want to say about that permanent thing is that you should really check with your town before building them, because they might be considered a taxable structure, and that really varies town by town. So if your town has a conservation commission or an ag commission, it's worth checking in with them to see how this may or may not be taxed before putting it up. Okay. So the main reason for a high tunnel in the Northeast, the reason that these are so popular, the first reason is that season extension, right? We're growing in a very short season. The ground freezes covered in snow. So this allows that month on either end for some of the hot crops. You might be able to plant tomatoes a whole month earlier. And then you can harvest straight through the winter, depending on how you do your seeding. Of course, you can do season extension outdoors with row cover and agribond. Those are that white stuff that's over the beds right now. Sometimes you need additional protection over the soil to keep things from freezing too hard in the winter, depending on how cold it gets in your climate. And these are just slightly more affordable, well, very much more affordable than a greenhouse that would have that sort of permanent flooring and heating unit in it. So like I said, these are very, temporary structures. You can see that these posts here are just driven into the ground with some iron rebar. And so there's nothing permanent holding this into the ground. It's secured to the ground so it doesn't blow away, but we could easily pull this tunnel up and turn it back into a hayfield or some other form of agriculture production. So very, temporary system. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that the plastic that covers tunnels is a specific type of plastic. They're typically treated with ultraviolet stabilizer. So you need to keep in mind this material is outdoors, in many cases 12 months out of the year. It's getting a lot of sunlight, a lot of wind. So this isn't the run-of-the-mill plastic that you get from the Home Depot. It is a special type of ultraviolet plastic. Most folks use like a 6 mil plastic, but it comes in 8 and 12 mil. There's other polywoven materials that you can use that might have a little bit more insulative value, but that 6 mil UV stabilized plastic is what is going to be most common. And that plastic is one of the biggest expenses for the tunnels. And it will last, 4 or 5 years. What happens is that the material starts to degrade and it affects the light penetration into the tunnel. So it affects your crop productivity. So while it may not be ripped or torn, may still be in one piece, you're really affecting the crop productivity if you don't replace it every 4 to 6 years. And so that is a expense that would occur after the initial construction that you might be wanting to plan for and think about if you do put up a tunnel. So another big reason for putting up the tunnels, in addition to season extension, is reduction in pest pressure. So you can see this is one of my high tunnels. These tomatoes are, at this point, very much disease-free. There's no septorial leaf spot or early blight on them like these outdoor tomatoes on the right. It's very common to have many different fungal diseases on field-grown tomatoes. And so when you put them inside in this area that's not getting any rainfall or splashing from the soil, you really eliminate a lot of diseases. You get some new ones that we then have to manage for, some different diseases, but not that early blight or septorial leaf spot. Some other photos I have here from different places I've visited. This is an orchard in Texas, and these are peach trees in a peach orchard. These peaches are grown organically because they have this plastic covering over them. The plastic is not on these on these peaches for the whole year. It's mostly when the fruit is on. And so they're able to get the organic peaches off of this orchard with the use of this protected structure. These are some cherries in Oregon. Again, these are also grown organically with the use of this structure. So that just really reduces or eliminates a lot of the fungal pathogens that would affect these stone fruit. And you can see the really beautiful disease-free cherries from inside this hoop house. And I put this photo in because they had created this interesting ladder as a way to get up and help to train and harvest the fruit. So you can see that little ladder that they had created. So a few other things I wanted to throw in there. This isn't what I wouldn't consider it a hoop house or high tunnel, but just a rain shelter. So if you're looking for not as much the added heat benefit, but you're wanting to eliminate the rain effect, these are some high quality raspberries that will go to the fresh market. This is in Quebec. And so they don't need the extra heat for the raspberries, but they do need to have really good control of those fungal diseases on the raspberries. So this is just a rain shelter, sort of similar to a high tunnel, but slightly different. You wouldn't keep that up in the winter. Here's just another, a little bit smaller one on a row of raspberries, protecting the fruit from the rain. And then these are some low tunnels protecting some strawberries at the UNH Woodman Farm in Durham. And these ones, you can see how they're cinched up between the wire hoops that are dug into the ground here. You can pull these sides down for a little bit of heat and frost protection. So these are ever-bearing strawberries, and they harvest these fruit right into almost Christmas some years. And so this plastic gets pulled down when it's cold or heavily raining, but mostly it's there to protect and control the water a little bit better. I did want to put in just one picture. I have two pictures of a traditional greenhouse. So in this system, again, there's that concrete floor. There is heating units. You can't see it in the photo. And all the top of the greenhouse, it has many different vents in it that open and close automatically. So this is a much more expensive and fancy unit. This is for a commercial plant business that sells a lot of plants to other landscapers and garden centers. And so they're also able to do some flood irrigation right on the floor. You can see these plants are all boxed in. And so that's one way that they're irrigating them, is just through that flood irrigation system.
Olivia, we do have a question in the chat that just came up.
All right.
And Andrew is wondering, can those low tunnels handle a snow load?
Good question. I don't think so. I think they're pretty, those wire hoops, they are just wire hoops. So if you had those systems designed with bent pipe, they might be able to hold the snow a bit better than the wire hoops. So no, I don't think those systems were held for snow, but if I'm wrong, I think Heather's on here. She might have a different answer, but I believe not. So
Yeah,
this is,
oh, sorry, Olivia.
oh, go ahead, Heather.
I would agree those hoops probably wouldn't stand up to snow load, but we have had some research going back quite a while. If you make them with metal conduit, they will handle the snow load. If you make it with that kind of plastic conduit, those don't survive the winter.
Great, thank you, Heather. Go back to my Next slide. Okay. So this is another, again, I would call this a greenhouse, but I wanted to throw this in here because this farmer was really innovative, and you can see this is actually hydroponically grown basil, and there's some strawberries you can see. And he had developed this lever system with basically using the same technology as a garage door, where he could move these trays up and down throughout the day so that they all got equal amount of daylight, sunlight through the canopy. And so you can see they're sort of staggered here, and those yellow pipes are the water that is being fed into them. And so he can actually use more square footage than if you were just typically growing on the ground in the soil, because he's using that vertical space. So a little bit more high tech, but I thought it was kind of neat. And he had developed this sort of lever system himself by, like I said, just using the same technology as a garage door.
Do you mind if I say something real quick, Olivia?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just want to point out in the chat, Matt, so he is the Carroll County Conservation District Manager. He just mentioned that he uses a Shelter Logic portable garage frame, and he covers that with ag plastic, which works really well, and it handles the snow well. He says he guesses it can be considered somewhat of a low tunnel. So I just wanted to point that out there to people if they're thinking about that option. Thank you,
Yeah,
Olivia.
there's definitely a lot of low-tech options as well as high-tech options. So this is more on the high-tech end, but I do have a photo coming up of a more low-tech system. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, structure design and what's out there. So typically, you know, a classic NRCS probably funded tunnel is going to have this Gothic style, the peaked roof. And these, and you can also see the supporting crossbows here that really help with the snow load. And so these systems are designed really to shed snow effectively. And so this is why we see them commonly in the northern climates. These like Quonset type hoop house style ones that are rounded are not going to be as good at preventing injury from snow. So we see these in the Northeast, but often the plastic is taken off or cinched up to the top in the winter months to help eliminate any damage from snow loads. And then there's also this larger system where you can have multi-bays, one against each other. And these are nice because they are quite large. They can go out in the field. You wouldn't have any, you know, power associated with these outside of your irrigation, but you can drive a tractor through these because they're the way they're designed. You can cultivate and bring your tractor right through those. So there's a bunch of different, these multi-bay systems. But that Gothic style is really what we recommend for folks that want to have their structure up, you know, 12 months out of the year. So this is a little bit more of a DIY if you're just getting into this, or you are more of a garden scale. This is a structure at the MOFGA headquarters in Unity, Maine. And so they've covered their tomatoes here. There's nothing in these, it looks like little trays here. I bet you could, there's nothing in them at this point. It's towards the end of the growing season, but I'm sure you could do some starts or even put some soil in there to do some crops that are a little bit shorter than a tomato. And I would say this would be really easy to take the plastic off in the winter, which might help its longevity a little bit. But if you kept this up through the winter, I might just install some crossbars to help with the strength of the structure a little bit more from snow load. Okay, so this is one of our structures that we have at the UNH Woodman Farm, and I put this in here because you can, I just wanted to point out these posts that we have here. These are simply for trellising of the peppers. They're not structural, but there's a lot of different ways in which you can train your pepper or more commonly a tomato crop. These are the trellising that we use here, we just kind of lump them all together around every fourth or fifth plant. So I wanted everyone to see that. And Heather was nice enough to send me some photos of some very damaged tunnels in Grafton County. There was a microburst at one point, and this is what the tunnel looked like afterwards. So they're not immune from bad weather. I don't know what the grower could have done to prevent this. I don't know if anything could have. That was a pretty extreme weather event, but snow management is something that is very important, and you can help eliminate any damage from snow through your management. So one of the things is just siting the tunnel correctly and making sure you are aware of the windward side, because you get a lot more, depending on your site, if you're in a big field, you get a lot more snow buildup on that side with the wind. And so you might need to do more snow removal in the winter on that side. The most important thing to do, this is Heather's tunnel in Grafton County, I believe. And you can see the snow has shedded off here, but it's built up quite a bit. And so she's probably going to come through here with a snow blower and remove that so that the snow can keep shedding off. The other thing to do when building these is making sure the plastic is really tight. If there is any loose material between the bars, the bows, excuse me, that's where you can get some damage happening. And the snow can take a tunnel down. If you get any rips or anything, there is some greenhouse plastic tape that you can use to fix the rip. And then also making sure that the tunnels are placed apart from each other enough so you can either get through there with a snowplow or your snow blower, whatever it is you're using, but so that there's enough room for that snow to shed off. And then depending on, what is the purpose of your tunnel? What are your goals with it? This is just another system that helps protect these ornamental plants at a garden center, so that if it rains or it gets cold, I believe this photo was in the spring, they can roll this system down to protect those plants, and it's, makes for easy shopping for the customer, and it looks nice, and has a lower price point than a whole tunnel structure. So some additional uses of a tunnel beyond, growing in the soil. This farm here is doing some start production in here. So this grower doesn't have a dedicated greenhouse for seedlings that is heated. So she's using her home. And then in the spring, once it's warm enough, she's putting her seedlings out here. And you can see there's some, this is just baling twine that's holding up these pallets. So she's able to use that space efficiently before putting the tomatoes in the spring as an additional spot to keep her seedlings protected. This is another ornamental farm. You can see all of the irrigation up here that is used for hanging baskets, but this photo was taken in the fall, so the hanging baskets have been sold. So they're using the tunnel for some dry storage, keeping their equipment safe. And then this is a different farm, but this high tunnel is used for spring plant production. You can see all the hanging basket irrigators, and they are curing their onions and squash and potatoes in here in the fall. So this is also, once you get a high tunnel, there's all sorts of other uses for them. So another consideration is, figuring out how you'll be irrigating and your access to water. We, almost always see some sort of drip irrigation set up. And so I would be considering what my access to water is before building the structure, because water is, obviously you need to be watering in there almost every day, depending on the conditions. So here we have in this tunnel on the right, there is a buried pipe and this hydrant that comes up, and this grower has a few different things set up here, but these two timers that you see here are connected to the drip irrigation on the beds. And then she also has just a hose here in case she needs to do any spot watering or irrigate any her transplants. And so she's not having to take off and on these different hoses with this nice setup here. She can just turn the lever and turn on whichever hose that she needs. So that's a nice feature to have. On average, most people have about 2 lines of drip irrigation per bed, but it kind of depends on what crop you're growing and some of your management, but it is nice to have more than 1 line of that drip irrigation per bed. And that's what you see on the photo on the left. And this is just photos were from an irrigation supply company headquarters. So this is a little demo that they had, but this green lay flat pipe is really nice because if you are having to transport water from your well or whatever your source is over a large area on the farm, this lay flat hose is nice because you can drive over it and it won't get injured by your tractor or your truck. So that's nice to have. And then depending on your water pressure, you can get these valves that turn off and on. So if you don't have enough pressure to irrigate your whole high tunnel at one time, you can do split irrigation, or if you have the same system set up for your tunnel and your field crops, you can set up those splits. And then the photo on the right, you can see how that is connected to the bed here in the spot here. So just considering, how are you irrigating your crops? That helps with siting it. What is your access to water? And what is the pressure like, so that you can make sure you're irrigating that tunnel efficiently and effectively. And then another consideration is just how you're rolling up and down the sides. So we often see like a T-bar at the end of the tunnel. This is just a bar that gets wrapped around the plastic. But this is a nice setup if you have any mobility issues or any disabilities. This is just a little bit easier of a system, a crank here instead of the T-bar system, a little bit safer and easier to use. So I wanted to show that. And then this photo has the polycarbonate plastic as end walls, and that is one option for the end wall. And Nick might talk about this more next week. But we often will see, wood end walls. The polycarbonate is nice, but it's a little bit more expensive. Or folks will use a combination of wood and maybe some windows that they have for free. So that the windows allow a little bit of light in as well. This is just an extremely simplified crop plan, but just to get you thinking about what the year of your year in a high tunnel looks like. So you're always seeding or harvesting something, and this, like I said earlier, the double cropping is really popular with farms in New England. So we have some heads of lettuce that will be harvested soon here in this photo, with a tomato crop that's coming into fruit. And normally we're preparing our fall transplants September or October for that early fall or late fall harvest. And then once you get below 10 hours of daylight, those crops really aren't growing. And so you need to make sure that they're established enough and they're banking that sunlight so that you can be harvesting at this time of year when the daylight is really low. Then once we get over 10 hours of daylight, they might start growing again. So yeah, we're just trying to maximize the productivity in that tunnel for not quite 12 months of harvest, but pretty close to it. Some of the most popular crops to grow in a tunnel system would be the tomato, eggplant, pepper, cucumber. Some folks are experimenting with ginger, and basil is another really nice crop for a high tunnel. But tomatoes are really the #1 crop grown in tunnels throughout New England. Some of the winter crops, and I've separated them here into 2 different groups because the Asian greens, the kale, spinach, some lettuces, not all lettuces, will handle those freezing temperatures really well. And then things like arugula, beets, turnip greens, endive, they will handle cold temperatures, but not maybe not that freeze thaw cycle. So those might be good for the fall, but not this time of year. And this is where you experiment and kind of figure out what works for your own region. And then just some different sources of tunnels here. This is not a complete list, but I know some folks might be interested in knowing where there are some regional suppliers. So there are 2 different companies in New Hampshire, Ledgewood and Rimmel, that supply these greenhouse kits. And just to note that, these tunnels are expensive. They can be difficult to manage, and they're very vulnerable to extreme weather. So they might not work for everyone. They might not work for where you're at right now with your system. And they can be really fun and amazing to play around with. But just to, keep an eye on the economics of it, which Jess is going to dig into a little bit. And then I did want to just put in the plug, and maybe this will be talked about next week, or in 2 weeks, but if you were wanting to go with a more DIY system, these low tunnels that you see here can be built with this pipe bender. And I believe the Coos County Conservation District has one of those. So if you didn't want to buy one, you can borrow it from them. And I believe that's all that I have. So I'll hand it over to Jess to dig into to the next topic. So let me stop share.
Awesome,
And I'll check
thank
the
you.
chat.
I just want to point out something real quick. Thank you, Olivia. That was awesome. That was a great introduction. It'll be great to dive more into site selection and construction next week for sure. So thank you. That was awesome. Also, I wanted to share, Aiden just commented in our chat saying she worked with Tunnel Vision's hoops this year. There was fantastic customer service and a lot of helpful hints in how-to info on their site. So they were out of Ohio, and they also were very good to work with. So I just want to point that out there too. Thank you, Olivia, again. And Jess, if you're ready to take over, talk to us a little more about numbers. Thank you.
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'll start sharing my screen, and one of these lovely ladies will keep their eye on the chat for me. Cool. So thank you, Olivia, for that awesome deep dive into season extension here in rural New Hampshire. I think it was really good for all of us to see visually all those photos. At least it was for me. I like to visually learn, and you were able to take us to Texas and Oregon and Quebec and New Hampshire, and I love that. And thank you to Whitney and others for inviting me here and having this series. I'm excited to be here and present, but also to learn with you over the next 5 weeks. I think there's a pretty great list of agricultural technical service providers on deck. So I'm super excited for that. One of the things that I get most excited about in my job for NHACD as a conservation planner is working with small and beginning farmers. I think your passion for growing food or fibers or flowers for your neighbors is palpable, and your energy, we can feel it as TSPs. We can, technical service providers, we can definitely feel your energy and your want for growth. And I think what I want to do tonight is talk you through a strategy for thinking through decisions like, should I build a high tunnel? Because I think that energy that I was talking about for small and new growers can turn into Well, yes, I'm excited. I want to buy 100 meat birds because I'm excited about having chickens. And yes, I'm excited. I want to go to 4 new farmers markets. And yes, I'm excited. I want a high tunnel. And yes, I want a new egg washer. And yes, and then we realized very quickly that we can't do 1,000 things really well. So one of my strategies is to think through these kind of on-farm decisions in using a tool called scenario planning. So scenario planning is a structured way for businesses to think about future decisions. I think oftentimes as new and beginning farmers, we talk things through at the kitchen table, or we have these thoughts in the shower, and we kind of make our decisions in a way that doesn't necessarily put numbers from our wallets and our bank accounts onto our future decisions. So this is really a way to think through and match numbers in a way that can be useful in saying yes or no to those meat birds or the egg washer or your new high tunnel. So like I said, it's not just working through a high tunnel, but this situation, this scenario planning can be used for all kinds of decisions. So 2020 certainly brought us lots of decisions to make as farmers and really everybody in terms of, okay, reality is much different now. How do I, as a farmer, pivot? Do I need to go to a farmer's market because all of my wholesale clients are now gone? Do I want to add livestock because people are really looking for meat this time of year? Or should I sell to an aggregator because I don't want to go to the farmer's market and be in the public anymore? So really, tonight we'll look at this as a tool to talk about the high tunnel, but really you can take this as a framework to think through many different kinds of problems, or not problems, growth strategies. And we're going to start by asking lots and lots of questions. You know, I talked earlier about how these decisions are often made at the dinner table or thinking things over in the shower. But we want to start asking ourselves lots of questions and writing down the answers so that we can match those answers with numbers. For the high tunnel that we're talking about tonight, what are going to be the costs for startup, right? So for install and building and shipping those materials and grading the land, prepping the site, what are going to be my hard costs for that setup that is going to be money leaving my bank account and going out into the universe? And where is that money going to come from? Do I have a nest egg that I'm ready to put towards a high tunnel and I'm okay with not having any more? Do I need to take out a loan? Do I qualify for that loan? How soon do I have to pay it back, and what's the interest rate? Kind of working through all of that, getting the actual answer and writing it down. And then we had to talk about labor. So do I have 12 neighbors who are going to come over and help me install? And can I get that pipe bender from Coos County to save me some money? Thinking through labor, not just, cash out. And how long will this process take? Timing is a huge deal for farmers, right? If you lose one season, that's X amount of dollars that you're not going to have. So if it's January 2021, am I going to quit my job outside of the farm and start working on this high tunnel tomorrow? Is that realistic? Or am I thinking that it's probably going to be September before I get all the lumber from my property milled for my own home built end wall? So thinking through, if I borrow the money in January, how far am I going to be until I make revenue back? And then we have this other set of questions that after we get this high tunnel up and running. So what does all this additional growing space mean? Okay, so I'm really excited about growing tomatoes for a longer period of time. Who's going to buy those tomatoes? Do I have a wholesale client, a restaurant that's really excited about buying X amount of pounds every week? And what's that price? Or do I need to bring them to an additional farmer's market or start a CSA? Can you have just a tomato CSA? Probably not. But thinking through that strategy of, okay, got the high tunnel, now what? What kind of labor and input needs do I now need to increase? Olivia talked earlier about irrigation. Oftentimes the systems that we're using for field irrigation are not going to be able to handle also irrigating the high tunnel. So does that mean that we need to have a new well and a new pump associated with that new irrigation? More costs and more costs. But also there's good things, right? There's more sales. Is there a market for those products like I was talking about? And what is having this high tunnel going to make me more efficient in? I'm super excited about my high tunnel at Jess's Diversified Farm because now I can grow all my own seedlings and I'm not going to have that cost of purchasing seedlings in. Or now I can cure tons more root vegetables because I can use that space as a curing space. So in what ways is this going to change my business, both for money in and money out, but also time and labor and in terms of capacity for your farm? So all of these questions are super important to think about as you're making your decisions. Tonight, we're really going to focus on direct changes in profitability. And we kind of think of these in 4 buckets when we're thinking about scenario planning. We've got our additional revenues and reduced expenses, but then we also have our reduced revenues and additional expenses. So the first 2 are the ones we get really excited about, right? Oh yeah, we're going to be able to grow from February to December instead of May to October. So that's exciting. And, my field specialist at UNH just told me that field tomatoes are, 1 pound per square foot and high tunnel tomatoes are 4 pounds per square foot. We're going to be rolling in tomatoes. We get really excited. And we're also going to have to use less water because we're going to have that really focused drip irrigation that Olivia talked about earlier. And we don't even have to put pesticides on anymore because we don't have that blight that she was talking about too. Thinking through all these things in terms of those buckets, those are our exciting buckets. And then we have the other 2 buckets that are kind of frustrating, but also really important to think through. Our reduced revenues are kind of your opportunity cost buckets. And opportunity cost is, what am I not going to be able to do because I have this high tunnel now? So before at Jess's Diversified Farm, I was grazing sheep in that land. And so now I'm not going to be able to graze sheep because my high tunnel is there. So now I'm going to have 1 less sheep because I have 1 less paddock for my grazing management. And so that 1 less sheep is an opportunity cost. Other opportunity costs in terms of labor are really important. So at Jess's Diversified Farm, I make handmade wool dryer balls. And because I'm going to be dealing with all this crazy high tunnel stuff and selling all those tomatoes, I'm not going to be able to make those wool dryer balls anymore. So we got to take that income from those wool dryer balls, which I'm not sure is very much money, but we still got to think about it. We got to take that income off of our balance sheet now. And then we have our additional expenses, which, are pretty simple to wrap your mind around: the high tunnel materials, the installation, the increased heat cost, and that cost of financing. So, excuse me, those are all really important kind of things to think through. And what I've done here is create an example of a cash flow scenario for Jess's Diversified Farm and what it looks like in year 1. And I can't see the chat. So as long as someone is telling me if anyone has questions or if I'm going too fast or something, just let me know.
You're good. No questions yet. You're all set.
Great. Yeah, so what I did here is set up an example of what cash flow might look like for your build the high tunnel scenario. So we're thinking through, okay, what am I going to do this year? We've got year 1 startup cost. And the thing to remember about this scenario planning that we're doing here is that it's impossible to get these numbers 100% correct, right? We're looking into a crystal ball. We're trying to parse out future numbers. We're never going to be 100% correct. And my numbers at Jess's Diversified Farm are going to be a lot different than Olivia's Diversified Farm down the road because I have already hired 6 people and she's on her own, and I work off farm and she doesn't. So again, just remembering that these are hard assumptions to make and you've got to make them for your own farm. So if we start at dollars out, we decided at my farm to go with Ledgewood Farms down for our high tunnel, and we're going to buy in everything because, like I said, I work off farm and I don't want to have to deal with that pipe vendor machine because I've got a crazy career already. And so we're going to bring that in. It's going to total up to $8,900. And we had our neighbor down the road. He is a specialist in grading roads. And he said, your slope is really not great. We're going to have to grade this out. So he gave us a quote for $2,000. And we had another neighbor down the road say, your irrigation isn't great. We're going to have to do a new well here because we're using a seasonal well for our field crops. So she said our well's going to cost $2,500. Great. And we also need to put up a new panel for electricity and get those vent fans. So adding in another 670 there, and thinking through that labor cost of putting things up. We've got about 12 neighbors who are willing to help, but we've got to hire 2 more guys to come on for 2 days. So that's going to total 250. So we think about our scenario and we're thinking of year 1, our startup costs are $14,250. And we're up in Coas County. So we reached out to Kelly and Ashley up there and we said, hey, we'd like to apply for the High Tunnel program. And they said, great. And they were so easy to work with and we loved it. And luckily our application was selected and we're going to get $10,000 once we get through this all. So really we loaned $1,400, but we imagine that we're going to pay back that $10,000 right away through NRCS. So we really only have to loan $4,250. That sounds great. We went to the bank and they got us a great rate of 3% a year for 3 years. So we're happy with that. And this is our scenario process, right? Like we're going through, we're putting numbers to all these things. So we went into year 2 and we're thinking through now what's going to happen in year 2. Excuse me. We don't imagine. We know from our really good record keeping from the past 5 years that our seeds come out at 3% of revenue generally, 2% for fertility, 1% for packaging, and 33% for labor. So these are our variable costs, the costs that are associated with the high tunnel that are going to change depending on how much production and how much revenue that high tunnel produces. Down here, these last 2, we have our fixed costs. These are costs that we're going to incur not at a variable rate. They're just hard costs. We know we have to heat the high tunnel and have electricity at 750, no matter what. We could put 1 tomato plant in or 100 and it's still going to be 750. And we decided to get some seed tables so we can start our own seedling. So that's going to be 500. So in this scenario, we're imagining that we can raise about $10,000 from our crop sales. We've got, we figured we can get about 4 pounds of tomatoes for every square foot of the high tunnel. We got about 2,000 square feet. So that's 8,000 pounds. And we round down to 6,670 because we're going to eat some, we know the bugs are going to eat some, and we're going to lose some on the way to that restaurant because the bucket falls over in the truck. Anyways, there's shrinkage. And so we're rounding down and we're selling all those tomatoes to that wholesale customer for $1.50 a pound. So that brings us out to about $10,000 worth of tomatoes. Again, your farm is going to be a lot different. Your crops are going to be a lot different. Your inputs are going to be a lot different. Your prices are going to be a lot different. I'm not organic. I can't get a price increase from my organic sales. This is just a way of thinking, not hard numbers. So then we took these percentages and we put real numbers to them from this $10,000 revenue point. And we add all that up and we subtract. So we add all our expenses and they come out to 5,150. We subtract that from our $10,000 revenue and we're at net proceeds for 4,850. And I'm thinking that sounds pretty good. But then I remember that we have to deliver those tomatoes to the restaurant. It's 10 miles away. We go twice a week, 20 miles gas, and we got to pay someone to do that. And we pay them $12 an hour. So that comes out to $560 for the 14-week season. And that pesky loan that we borrowed, we've got to pay that back too. So those are 2 more costs that come out of our net proceeds. So just for our high tunnel, this is just a section of our entire budget, not the overall budget. This is not our net profit for the farm, but just our total contribution from the high tunnel to the farm. And I'm thinking, okay, like that sounds pretty good. $2,800, at least we're making money. But we've got this amount of money to pay for going to our other overhead costs for the farm. And are folks familiar with what overhead costs are? Anybody want to throw out a couple options for like, oh yeah, we've got to pay for this and that and this? You can take your mic off or throw it in the chat. This is perfect time for me to grab some water.
Awesome. So I see someone suggested, oh, Olivia, thank you. So land taxes.
Perfect. Yeah, land taxes and also land loans. Like, what about our mortgage? You know, our farmhouse is on a piece of property that we need to, excuse me, pay a mortgage on, and but also taxes. Yep.
Awesome. We have a couple more coming in. Again, taxes, good job. Some wear and tear on the equipment.
Yeah, and we call
sure.
that depreciation or repairs and maintenance. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone right below that said other equipment payments, depreciation. Good job. Insurance.
Yeah, insurance is a great answer. It's one of those tricky ones that can be an overhead cost, but it can also be a direct cost. So if my farm has never had an employee before, and now I need to pay, you know, workers' comp insurance or other different things, that can be a direct cost. But in general, like my farm insurance is an overhead cost.
Thank you. We also have advertising as well.
Yep, marketing budgets go across all the different enterprises. And the point here is just that, like, right, we're talking about this budget for a high tunnel, but really we also have the budget for the livestock animals. We also have a budget for those wool dryer balls I sell and like other value added products. And all of those contributions need to add up to cover those overhead costs like marketing and our farm truck and tractors and taxes and mortgages, and then it needs to still be profitable. So I think that's my only point there of like thinking through these enterprises in ways that it's a contribution towards the total farm budget.
Absolutely. We have another one that's good too from Henry, replacement of plastic. So that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah. In our world, we call that repairs and maintenance, R&M. So if you ever see that R&M abbreviation, that's what that's talking about, repairs and maintenance. Okay, so some of you are saying like, okay, Jess, that's like a lot of assumptions to make. How do you know you're going to make, be able to sell your tomatoes at $1.50? What if you have less than 8,000 pounds yield? Like there's a lot of guesswork in this, and there totally is. And one of the key things about scenario planning is what we just did is just step one. And we did that all in Excel so that we can go through and now make changes to what we were thinking. So, okay. Here are tests for our assumptions. What happens if restaurants' markets evaporate? We never thought that was going to happen before 2020. But now, all of a sudden, that deal that I just made with the restaurant up the road, they're not buying any tomatoes. So what happens, right? I have to now invest in a lot of ball jars and a commercial kitchen space rental, and it's going to cost me X, Y, and Z more. And so I add that into my Excel spreadsheet that I was talking about 3 slides ago, and that's a new direct cost. And then disease and pest problems affect yield. Again, we could sell them to the restaurant, but we lost 4,000 pounds to X pest problem. Or oppositely, we have a lot more. And so, if we estimate that our high tunnel is going to produce 8,000 pounds and we really get 12, what's the profit there? Now we're talking way more than that $2,800 that we can add to our total farm contribution. Again, other assumptions that you want to think through. I need to increase farm insurance, or what happens if my NRCS application isn't funded? Like, okay, so NRCS applications are a competitive process, and there was a lot of applications this year, and my high tunnel didn't get selected. Now I have to loan all of that money. So $14,000, it's going to increase my that 3%. Can I still get that at 3% for 3 years? Thinking through how that tiny adjustment goes through that whole process to the end is really, really important. And again, using Excel can help make this easier because I'm just going in and making a tiny adjustment at one, and then hopefully the formulas that I've put in adjust as well, and I can get a new number at the end. So we're almost done with that total overview and of scenario planning, but we're going to ask you to do it twice more, right? So build a high tunnel was one option. Another option that we've been thinking about at Jess's Diversified Farm is grazing animals in that space. I want to get 10 more sheep. What will that scenario planning budget look like? And what is the dollar amount at the end of the day? Is it more than a high tunnel? Don't know. Let's go through it, and excuse me. And there's also this, what I always say is, what is also the status quo? Call this the do nothing approach. What happens if we just keep doing the same thing? In order to get this, you need to plug in your numbers from last year. And this is key. You need to have numbers from last year. If I can say anything to new and small farmers, it's keep farm records. I want you to be able to tell me, this is how much fertilizer we used in this enterprise last year, or this is how much water we use. This is how much time I spent doing that, because your time is money. If you had to pay somebody else, that is actual dollars, but also that's you not spending time somewhere else. So keeping really good farm records is key in making these financial decisions in a really meaningful way for your farm. So if you remember one thing from this whole presentation, hopefully it's that I should just write that down once a week. At the end of the week, this is what I did. Ideally, at the end of the day, this is how many hours I spent doing this. This is how much fertilizer we use this year, and just put that into an Excel spreadsheet so you can use it again for planning next year. And if you need help with that, UNH Cooperative Extension has an amazing ag business team that I'm sure is willing to work with you. Or get in touch with one of us and we'll get you the help you need on kind of getting into a class about farm record keeping. That can be really beneficial as well. I think that's all I have, but I'm sure there might be questions for both Olivia and I, and I think that Whitney said that this would be the time for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat. If you don't have any questions, then you're welcome to leave. But if you want to stay on for a little longer for conversation, that's great. Also, can I ask Olivia and Jess, would you guys mind putting your emails in the chat as well, in case someone might be a little too shy to type in a question? That way they could email you a question and they could get the help that they need. Also, thank you again, Jess. That was great. That was a very quick overview. There's totally a lot to high tunnels. You both, Olivia and Jess, you both did a really good job. We are here. You have a team. So if you still have questions, please drop it in the chat. We're happy to help. And even, via email, we're happy to answer questions that way too. So we want to make sure you guys feel supported if this is something that you want to do. Okay, so we do have a question. We have Aiden's asking, do you have any preferred drip irrigation suppliers?
I don't have a preferred supplier. The only one I'm really familiar with is Brookdale Irrigation Supply and Fruit Farm, and they're down in Hollis. And the nice thing about them is that they are in New Hampshire, although it's quite a drive from Collis County, but you can do the pickup and save on the shipping costs because some of that stuff is just really heavy. So if you have a truck and can do the pickup, you can save maybe even half the cost just on shipping.
Awesome, thank you. Jess, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, or Olivia did pretty good? Okay, awesome. Let's see.
Rainflow, yep, is another great company. I think they're in Massachusetts, but yeah, Rainflow is another great one. I did show a picture of the irrigation timers, and those you can actually just get at a regular garden center. I've seen them there for about 40 or 50 bucks. And I didn't mention this super strongly, but I really recommend getting an irrigation timer for whatever kind of irrigation you're using in the high tunnel. I know a lot of folks think, oh, I'm going to just go in and manually turn it on, but it's stressful to have to remember that every day, and those tunnels get really dry. So if you can set that timer to turn on at 6 a.m. in the morning when the plant, it's a really efficient time to irrigate, you're just not having to think about it. You should still check on it to make sure it's working properly, at least weekly. But I really recommend spending 40 to 60 bucks on a good irrigation timer. And you can get those from those commercial sites, or they often are at the local garden centers.
Awesome, thank you. We also have Nick, the UNH, he's the equivalent to Olivia, so food and ag field specialist for COAS. He said, Griffin's in Maine is also good. Harris Farmers Union in Conway is good as well. And we do have a couple other questions. You guys are doing great here. So there is a question about an upcoming session. Will it be specific to NRCS High Tunnel program? And Kelly actually did answer that in the chat. Yes, so that'll be session 3, and Kelly will be talking about that program, NRCS specific, and go more in details to walk everybody through that if you do want to submit an application. So yes, there'll be much more details. Thank you, Kelly. We have another question. You guys are doing good. I'm getting bombarded with questions here. Does the NRCS loan require in-ground only? Can you use the trays on the side like in one picture? I don't know.
I think we will bait you with that. Kelly's going to talk about that, and she is a veteran with NRCS and knows the programs in and out, and she's going to be really helpful to you in the next session.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess.
There's a question here about the issues with persistent soil pathogens, and I can mention that. You certainly can still get some soil-borne diseases in tunnels, and we can help diagnose that for you. I would say one point just being that often I see folks that have some kind of disease or something funky happening, and they're not really sure what it is. And so it's really important to get a positive diagnosis on that so you know how to treat for it, because there might be something you can do, or there might not be. Some of those diseases in the soil cannot be eliminated without not growing in that soil for many years. So getting a positive ID is really important. And then the thing with greenhouses is it's a really confined area. So there might be an opportunity if you have something to remove some of that soil and bring in new soil from outdoors or something like that. Like because it's not the whole, acres and acres of the farm, it might be just a 20 by 50 or whatever your greenhouse size is. There might be some management option that you can do. It depends on the type of soil pathogen that you might have. But yes, you are typically growing in the soil, so you still have the potential for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Olivia. And Kelly did mention that as well. NRCS does require growing in the ground or raised beds. And another follow-up as well, Matt mentioned that the hose timer with a simple irrigation system is an excellent addition for efficiency. Pam, thank you for the wonderful comment. And we have another question. What about pollination in the confined area? And thank you, Bill, also. That's a nice comment. I'm glad this was very helpful.
Yeah, so some folks will use some screen or netting on the sides and end walls to eliminate things like tomato hornworm or Colorado potato beetle. And so in that case, if you are using the screens, then you would need to do your own pollination, because most tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers, not all cucumbers, but many things need that cross-pollination from the bees. So people will buy in bumblebees and put them in the tunnels. It's not really the best environment for them. It's kind of hot in there, so they're a little bit cranky when they're in there. But if you were using screens to eliminate any pest insects, then you need to provide your own pollination. But a typical greenhouse that has that passive ventilation where the sides are open to anyone that can come in, any of those pollinators, then you don't normally need to have that supplementary pollination. Heather and I have done a lot of work on adding pollinator habitat inside the greenhouses, and that helps bring insects like hoverflies and bumblebees, and they help with general IPM. And we'll probably talk about this later in more detail. You can see some photos of what plants you would incorporate into the tunnel system that would help with bringing in both predatory insects as well as the bumblebees.
Awesome. Thank you, Olivia. Does anybody else have any questions? Please feel free to put them in the chat. Let's see. I don't see anything else coming in. I'm really glad that this seems to be very helpful to everybody. I know at first it can probably be a little overwhelming if it's an introduction and you're not sure about high tunnels. So thank you so much for sticking with us through this whole time. We're super excited to give you guys more details. Also, we're all here for support if you need anything. If you have any added questions, please feel free to email us. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for talking about site selection and construction. And we even will have a high tunnel grower with us to present as well. So we look forward to having you back in a few weeks. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. And thank you, Olivia, and thank you, Jess. You guys did a great job. Have a good night, everyone.